Welcome to part two of quantitative methods. We left off before about talking about research questions when you're exploring a new area or a hypothesis where you're making an educated guess based on what we already know, based on theory and research. So now I want to continue with the idea of the steps of writing that question or a hypothesis in quantitative research. First, you have to name the variables, the concepts. Variable could be something like gender or race or age cohort, like generation, like Gen Z versus I'm Gen X, that or boomers or whatever, right? But it can also be variables like interest in time spent looking at social media or interest in pornography or literally anything else it is you might be interested in, attitudes about women's bodies, attitudes about men in leadership. There's all kinds of things you can measure. You have to name what those variables are. Then you have to determine the type of relationship you're interested in. Is it unknown? So you're going to ask a question, or could it be causal, not casual, by the way, causal, right? Are we trying to say that X causes Y, X leads to it, right? Or predicts it? Or is it correlational? These two things correlate. The more you get one, the less you get of another, or the more you get of one, the more you get of the other, right? So a question asked, to what extent does X relate to Y, right? How close are these things interrelated? Or it correlate, a hypothesis is that X, whatever it is you're interested in, social media use, correlates with or causes Y, loneliness or social connection or number of friendships or number of minutes spent in person interacting with friends and colleagues. So, in order to set up your research question or hypothesis, you have to know the difference between independent and dependent variables. The independent variable is the thing that you think is a cause, right? Or the thing that is the predicting factor, and it can be manipulated, right? Meaning that you can decide to only look at a particular gender, or look at to make sure you know what everybody's gender is, or you can look at what kind of sexual orientation people express, or what their age cohort is, like what age they are, what year they were born. You could look at things like declared, being a member of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or registering as an independent, right? Those are things you can manipulate, meaning you can say, okay, let me get people who are high in this or low in that or identify this way, right? And then, having manipulated that, having gotten those certain things, your dependent variable is the thing that is the effect, right? So they vote this way, or they vote in these kinds of patterns, or they use social media this way, right? Based on this identity, or based on this interest, or based on this attitude, that the thing that you're going to manipulate, then you're going to control for and say, I'm only going to find people who are like this, right? And then I'm going to measure the effect that independent thing is that was manipulated to the effect, the thing that was actually measured. Here's some examples. For example, an independent thing that you can control for, or you can measure, right, in order to be able to say that it then either causes or correlates with. So you could say, for example, the number of minutes that people spend doom scrolling every day, right? Then we're gonna say, okay, what is that? And then we're gonna say, what can we measure? And we're going to measure perceived loneliness. Like, do you feel like you're lonely? Do you feel like you have enough social connection? Or minutes of exercise, right? How many minutes of exercise your day? And then does that cause you to have more or less symptoms of depression? Same thing if you practice self-compassion, right? If you engage in this behavior, did that lead to or cause less conflict with your friends, less common? So these kinds of things are independent variables, right? That you can manipulate or choose, select from, right? And then you measure the dependent variable. And so this can lead to descriptive research questions. How are students using DMs on social media, right? And is there a correlation between being a college student and using the DM function of social media, right? You can look at a difference. Is there a difference in dating practices between heteronormative and LGBTQIA plus college students? So these two groups have a difference. Students often want to compare men and women, for example, or people of color and white people, or Gen Z and boomers, or Gen Z and Gen X, those kinds of things. And then the third type of question or hypothesis is a relationship or an association, right? Um, you're saying that these things correlate. So I could argue that students with disabilities at Jesuit universities will experience, right? It correlates with moderate levels of microaggressions based on their identity, right? So they will encounter ways in which they're made to feel unwelcome because they have disabilities. That's an example of a relationship or associate correlation.